All right. Well, hello, everybody. So this is the explainer video for how you will complete for, depending on what class you're taking with me, depending on what semester, what year, what century you watch this video. Hopefully it'll last more than just a few semesters of get a few semesters of use out of it. This is a how-to video to complete Annotated Bibliography Part 3. There's a couple of different videos that I've put up on a YouTube page that help with this process. This one is specific to any student starting in the fall of 2024 or later, because the Annotated Bibliography project no longer allows, or I no longer allow in the Annotated Bibliography project articles or databases or websites. The goal is for you to learn from this video and in the project how, as history undergraduate students, to identify books and what books you need to find for the Annotated Bibliography project. The reason for this, and obviously the point of this entire project, is that historians, perhaps if not necessarily uniquely among the disciplines, but in a lot of ways still very different than a lot of different disciplines across the university, still primarily communicate with one another via books. Historiography is still very rooted in books and citations in that manner. As a colleague of mine put it once, an article is just an unfinished book. And because of that, we should consider, as you all are learning and training to be historians, whether it's just in this class or in general, how to find books, how to use books, and how to correctly break them down as part of a research process. So what we're going to do today, I'm going to start by sharing the assignment so we're all on the same page here. If I can figure out how to share things, that's not my strong suit. Looks like I'm sharing correctly the Annotated Bibliography Project Guidelines for History 327. Now, this is for U.S. Military 1, but the project will be the same for U.S. Military 2, 328. Other random classes I teach are the American 1s and 2s. I think it's 104 and 105. Very rarely will I teach history 386, which is Struggle for Unity in Germany. These are classes that all would fall under the bailiwick of the same project idea. So if you're watching this video, it covers the project as it relates to any of those classes as well. So this also, however, and I want you to remember this, would be a very useful video for you in terms of learning the tips and techniques I'm going to give you as a working historian in the field, and as a well-versed librarian in this process. And how you can find material for any of your classes. If you are assigned projects that require secondary source material, whether that is books or articles, though in this case books, watch this video, listen to the tips, try to remember how these things work, and try to watch me work through the system, and you'll find that these things are applicable basically across the board. It can be very, very useful in a variety of different ways for you. So without further ado, I'll talk a little bit more about the assignment so you know what to expect, and then we'll actually jump in and I'll show you the process of how the library catalog works, where you can locate books, how to obtain those books, how to break the books down, and obviously most important for you, as I'm sure you're thinking about it, how you can, while you're looking at it here, how you can look at Annotated Bibliography Part 3, and how you can functionally find the 7 books that have been assigned to you, how you can figure out which of these, which of the parts of the assessment you can obtain without ever physically seeing the book versus what you need to have once you have the book in your hand, and then break it down as any annotated bibliography should be kind of examined, written about, and then submitted to me for grading. So let's look at what an annotated bibliography part is, because what an annotated bibliography is, because this is a big chunk of what your assignment is now, what other professors, either in the history department or in other departments, may require of you, is an annotated bibliography is essentially you saying that in the process of preparing to write a term paper or a paper or a research project or any level of writing, is these are the sources that would help me do that would help me write this paper. Now, in this case, I really want you, and your assignment is to concentrate on the books themselves that would help you write this paper, the monographs, the secondary sources, these big, heavy, annoying books that sometimes feel like a real difficult thing to plumb. These are the bread and butter of historians. And knowing what the catalog can do for you, knowing what these books can do for you, knowing how they can assist you in your research for this class or for others, is really what an annotated bibliography is supposed to do. Is it sets a really good groundwork for how you will eventually write papers down the road. And in this case, because there's no paper down the road, you're just writing the annotated bibliography. Think of this as a really good practice assignment to make you a better historian down the road, or make you a better researcher. Not even if you want to be a historian, just make you better at researching and understanding the different parts of the catalog, the different parts of U of L's collections, and as I will explain to you, kind of the wider collections that exist out in the world, which we can bring to you as part of your perks of being an undergraduate at the University of Louisville. So let's look at the annotated bibliography part 3. What's expected of you and why you'll be searching the way you're searching is very much tied to the relationship of the project itself. So first off, an annotated bibliography in this case is 7 sources, depending on what your professor asks for. It can be more, it can be less. In this case, 7 seems like a reasonable number, A, because it's a lucky number, and B, because I didn't want to grade 8. So how about that? You only have to do 7. Each one is generally 1 to 2 paragraphs long, because what you're trying to do is describe what the source is, why it's important in terms of its relationship to the general historiography, but then most importantly, why it's important to your projected paper. And this is the key. And I want you to really remember this and think about this as you go about this process. Is the most important part of an annotated bibliography, whether it's for me or for anyone else, is explaining why you selected this source and why this source is germane to the paper you'll be writing. And the better you do at tying it to particularly your thesis statement and saying, this book will assist my thesis or prove my thesis by saying blah, 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 the stronger your paper or your annotated bibliography and its grade will be. If I see the words in your annotated bibliography, this book will prove my thesis by examining blank, that is very indicative to me that you've done the exact thing you're supposed to be doing. If I don't see those words or some formulation of those words, it makes me wonder if you really got into understanding how the book and your thesis go together. That's the whole thing, is attaching book or source, whatever you're doing, to thesis statement. Those two things must come together in a significant way so that you're proving not only that you understand the source that you're using in your annotated bibliography, but also why it's important in the first place. Secondly, and this is the key thing, is as you can see from that list, there are quite a few things that you're going to want to mention as you discuss the source itself. And as we'll get into it, I'll show you that you can do basically almost all of these things simply by looking at the catalog records themselves. And I'll show you a little bit about what that means. However, some things are slightly more important than others. If you look at the list that we're looking at here, particularly, I'll highlight it just so we're all on the same page. These are the key pieces of what makes up an annotated bibliography subject. Each one of your sources, each one of the 7 sources, will get 1 to 2 paragraphs written about it, including these different things that you're discussing. So you want to cite the way you want to write this out is very simple. You want to cite the thing and then write 2 paragraphs about it generally. And in those paragraphs, you're going to talk about what is the source, why it's important in terms of its relationship to your topic overall, why you selected it, anything unique or useful about it, how it's important to your thesis, as I mentioned, where it is in the historiography of the subject, and then conclusions of the author generally in the book. Now, this seems like a lot, but as you can tell, I've highlighted, just to make it a little easier on you, I've highlighted the ones that are the most vital for you, the things you really want to concentrate most on when you write up your source summaries. And this isn't just for me, like I said, if you ever get an annotated bibliography assigned to you, come back to this project and come back to these guidelines, because they lay out what really an annotated bibliography is in general. So the 3 most important ones, the ones that must be in every one of the 7 source summaries that you write, are why you picked it, why it's important to your thesis, and how it can be used to prove your thesis. Now, in annotated bibliography part 2, you're writing what your thesis is going to be. So think about that. If your general topic was, I'm interested in the War of 1812, and then your thesis is that American unpreparedness in the War of 1812 caused unnecessary casualties and the prolongation of a war that America should have prepared better for. There's your good thesis statement. So then the question would be, how do I find, or where do I find 7 books that prove my point? And that is relatively easy to do, actually. I know it seems like a daunting task, but I'm going to explain to you in this video how you find those 7 sources. And then while you're looking for those 7 sources, what you're doing is you're coming back to these bullet points and you're saying, what about these bullet points can I find and can I be able to write about when I go to write this annotated bibliography to prove that the source I selected is useful or germane to my topic? And that's the goal. And as you can see from the different things, there's a lot of information you can put in. You want to kind of, if you can, mention or hit on each one of these things, but the 3 big ones, the 3 bolded ones, must be in every one. And I'm going to show you some tips. I'm going to show you kind of a how-to that will allow you to kind of plumb the catalog and plumb the stacks and say, this is what I want. This is what I'm interested in. And this is how I can get it from the system itself. So without further ado, let's go about that. I'm going to use a sample topic so that when you're researching, I want you to think about it from your perspective and what your topic is, but I'm going to stick with a singular topic idea so that we know when we're researching things, we can find what we want to find. So I'm going to minimize this and bring us to, make sure I've got this shared correctly. We should be looking, hopefully, yes, at the University of Louisville's homepage. Now, the University of Louisville's homepage feels like it changes every 5 minutes, so I'm not going to concentrate too heavily on how you link to the University of Libraries page, because this is where you want to end up. You want to end up on library.louisville.edu. And when you get there, you'll know you're in the right place for a variety of reasons. Most importantly, it's going to say University of Libraries. But secondly, there's this big box in the middle. And this big box in the middle is your best friend. Usually if a professor is telling you that, you need to go do research and you're allowed to use whatever type of scholarly source that you're interested in, lots of students tend to go to the databases. But as I've mentioned, this project is a no database project. You are working with physical materials, the books themselves that make up a historian's toolbox, so to speak. And so I'm going to show you a little bit about the catalog for a variety of reasons. I'm going to we'll just go ahead and start by clicking books, and this will help you. It'll help me. It'll help everybody if we just start with this process by clicking books and limiting this whole thing to book searching. So in this case, we're going to look at the concept of the decisive battle as my preferred, or as my research topic that we'll use to kind of specifically zoom in so that you all can think about your topic in the round as you are putting in these search terms. Now, once we've clicked books, you can see all these limiters that it's automatically found. In fact, to make things somewhat easier, I'm going to click Libraries Worldwide as well, so it shows all books that result in the phrase decisive battle in all libraries worldwide. So one of the great things that this catalog does is called the World Catalog, WorldCat for short, is that it gets anything that falls under that subject heading or that term that you've put in from anywhere, whether it's at U of L or otherwise. And the thing that you want to think about when you go about searching is these search terms are only as good as what you put in to the system. The system is, it's not necessarily the most intuitive, the goal being that generally these systems are created for researchers. And as researchers, we often have very specific and sometimes very broad topics, but generally what you put in is what it's going to give back out to you. The goal being that it thinks that you know what you're talking about more than it necessarily does. And because of that, its searching is really dependent on what you put into it. So let's look at what the phrase decisive battle gets. I've not said anything more specific about what this topic actually is or what it means. What it's trying to do is find any matches of that phraseology in general. As we can see, we're seeing battles from the 500s, from the 1800s, from the 1400s. We're seeing things that are so far all over the place, all completely and utterly from various wars, various centuries, various geographical places, not all of which would necessarily impact the topic because I haven't been very specific. So let's think about this as ways that we can limit our information. Maybe I want to find decisive battle And I want to make sure that I'm talking about just the Napoleonic Wars or just wars in the 18th and 17th century. So let's say we want to make things more specific. One of the great things that our system does is it has these things called limiters or operators. And you can usually say and, or, but, or not, or and, or not. I'm adding a but in there for no reason. And, or not. In this case, we want to add and. So we can say decisive battle and we'll say Napoleon. Let's just see what happens when we add Napoleon to that. I don't know why I capitalized Napoleon, but here we are. So we have a battle, Battle of Waterloo. We've got the pursuit of victory from Napoleon to Saddam Hussein. Ooh, the allure of battle, a history of how wars have been won and lost. Now I see from the contents, battle, decisive, battle, defeated. I see Napoleon and the decisive battle in this one. See all these little limiters that it's trying to find? These can be very helpful to us. So let's grab the first one because it says Napoleon and the decisive battle. If this was, it's unusual. Let's just try clicking it. There we go. We click this and we suddenly have a couple of really great keys that tells us that one, this is a useful source for our annotated bibliography, but also would be a very useful source for the thesis itself. One of the really great things that the catalog can do for you in terms of book searching is it points out a few things almost immediately, and it tries to draw them to you in a very clear way. We'll go back to the list so I can show you what we're looking at. It's already, because we clicked book, it's already limited to books only, which is exactly what we're aiming for. Now within books are print books, ebooks, and in this case, theses or dissertations. You're really aiming for these two, the print book or the ebook, and either one is fine. An ebook is usually just an electronic copy of a print book that's already been written somewhere. It doesn't matter which of these two you're using as long as you're using one of these two. Because it's searching in libraries worldwide, it's going to default to anything that fits this topic that we discussed up here, but are somewhere in the world. And that's a great thing, but it also will show the University of Louisville's holdings first, which is perfect because really what you want is, in an ideal world, you'd like to put your hands on all 7 of the sources that you are looking for. If you're not waiting until 11:59 on the very last night, that's relatively easy to do. Give yourself, 2 or 3 weeks to work through this project. Find the books that you want to find. Look through them, as I'll show you how to do in a moment, but it's good to give yourself the lead time to find these items, and I'll show you why for a variety of reasons. But we've picked our first book, and now we need to investigate whether or not this book is going to be useful to us. This is perhaps the big point where you have to go from where you've searched and what you've searched in this big list that you've searched and created to whether or not this would help me in my quest to figure out if this book is useful for one of my 7 sources, because that's what you're trying to do, is distill what the library catalog has based on your sourcing and whether or not it could actually fit into the project. So in this case, we're looking for questions of Napoleon as they relate to winning decisive battles and therefore winning political victories. In this case, we have a whole summary about this book and what is in this book. This is an immensely useful thing to remember. By and large, most books published in the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years, mostly, depending, have a great deal of information about them available in the catalog. And you can do your very first information searching and your very first information understanding, so to speak, and I'll make this much more clear by putting these things side by just looking in the catalog. So if we look at these two things side by side, we can look to find whether or not the key pieces of our annotated bibliography can be answered before we ever even have to go pick up the book off the shelf. So can we find the age, reliability, and quality of the source selected? We can. It's a print book from 1996 by Oxford University Press. Doesn't get much better than that, so we know that it's reliable and it's a quality source. Can we tell some important information about the source, like the focus or who wrote it? Here's our author. Here is, as we mentioned, a summary of everything in the book. If we read through the summary, we can find that it would be about in his original and provocative study, Brian Bond discusses the successes and failures of military and political leaders in their pursuit of victory over the last 2 centuries. Does that sound like it might be important to us? Heck yes, it does. If we scroll down further, we can find even more about this source. It has an entire chapter on Napoleon and the decisive battle. It has an entire chapter on the Napoleonic influence of Napoleon in his quest for decisive battle afterwards. It has several other chapters that might be more useful to other things, but these two chapters right here, Napoleon and Napoleon's legacy, are fantastically important for our source. So just like that, in our very first attempt to find sources, we have found a book that is useful to us. Now here is the great spot that you are in as a student in the 21st century. One of the first things that we have to remember is that we also need to start each one of our sources with the correct citation. So if you are working on this side by side, here is what your project will look like. You need to create a citation and then write those 2 paragraphs about it. If you're not sure or you're not confident in your citation skills, don't worry. The system does it for you. It has a big button that says click and cite. Since this is a history class, you want to learn the Chicago style. If you click this button, look at all of the citation things that it will do for you automatically. If you're in other classes, don't forget this. This is a really, really good boon to learn your process. Now, in this case, we want the author date process for Chicago. This is history again, so Chicago is the preferred method. We click Chicago, it generates the citation. All I have to do is click copy citation, bring it back over here, and paste. Now, as you can see, it didn't paste correctly the italics, so we need to go back. Make sure the italics are right. It's always good when you're doing this to make sure that you double check your citations against regular citation guidelines that the catalog is usually caught up in, but not always perfectly. One thing to remember that this one can't do for you is it can't put in the important, I'll show you how to do it, the very important hanging indent. So you just right click your citation, go to paragraph, change it from special to hanging, and there. Just like that, you found source number 1, you found a good summary of source number 1, and you cited it correctly. So now you know, I have one source selected and I've cited it. My next thing is I need to start writing about it. Now you can do this one of 2 ways. In this case, I probably want to put my hands on this book to make sure I know what the author is saying. I've got a good idea of what's in it. I've got a good idea of the chapters, and now I need to go to these chapters and figure out what's here. Since this is a physical book, a print book, it doesn't say ebook. I can't just click a button and have the ebook pop up and tell me what it is. But it tells me on the right-hand side of the screen where this item is. In this case, this item, The Pursuit of Victory, is available in Ekstrom Library in the compact storage system. Now, our library has, Ekstrom Library has, what's essentially 3 big storage systems. One is the general stacks, which you can walk up to and just kind of walk around and pull books off of to your heart's content. I'll tell you about just in a minute one of the fastest and best ways to do really big searching to find all 7 books at once, so to speak, is to just go up to the stacks and pull things. Historians, for the last 150 years, even today, one of the best ways you can find extra stuff is to literally just walk up there and pull stuff off the stacks based on one book you found in the catalog. However, we have 2 closed storage systems, the robotic retrieval system and the compact storage system. Both of those have this big green button that you just click request, and the system does everything for you from your Ulink ID and password. And once that clicks in, all you have to do is click submit, and you'll get a nice email from the department. In fact, I'll just submit this just so you can see how it goes. It submits the request. You are one of 1 in the hold queue, and I know that I'll get an email in the next few days from the compact shelving staff saying, hey, your book's ready to pick up. And then I'll go pick it up, come back to the book, and look at these chapters and be able to determine how useful they are to my source. Now you may say, okay, that's 1. How do I get more? This is the great question, and there's a lot of different ways to do that, but I will say one of the cool ways the catalog helps you with this process is we found one book that we know we want. Theoretically, the way a cataloging system works, the way a classification system works is books that are like the book you just found are easiest found right next to it. Because I can't walk up to the stacks and find this book because it's in closed shelving, what I can do is scroll to the bottom and browse the shelf virtually. This nice little browse the shelf virtually option is a very cool and very useful little button. that kind of takes the place of actually physically going to the stacks. Now, right next to it is a book about War Made New, Weapons, Warriors, and the Making of the Modern World. Let's see if that fits what we've been talking about. Examines how technological innovation shaped the rise and fall of empires during 4 historical periods. We're not really talking technology, are we? So let's double check the contents to see if there's anything terribly useful for us. Well, I see Breitenfeld and Lutzen. That's the 1600s. That's not Napoleon. I see Assay. That's in India, and that's Wellington, but not Napoleon. And then Königsgrätz is the Austro-Prussian War, so that's not Napoleon. So even though it's next to the book that we really wanted, it doesn't really fit what we need. So we'll close this one because it didn't do what we wanted it to do. We'll go back and let's browse the other way. Ah, look at that. European warfare from 1660 to 1815. That one is on the virtual shelf next to the book we know we want and we know we use. Now, in this case, we can probably assume that it concludes in 1815 with the Battle of Waterloo, that it might be useful to us as Napoleon. So let's check the summary. A wide-ranging analysis of European land and naval warfare from the military revolution of the mid-17th century to the end of the Napoleonic Wars. The author assesses the conduct, cost, and consequences of European wars for major and minor powers. That sounds pretty useful. I think I might want that. Let's check the contents. Warfare in the Revolutionary and Napoleonic Age. I think we've found book number 2. And just like that, we can click the request item button from the robot. I won't do it again because I don't want to make the staff have to keep getting these books for me. And we have book number 2. And we can do the same thing that we did with book number 1. We can click Cite. We can click Chicago author date. Copy it. Paste it. It looks good. The citation is fantastic. It fits on one line. And just like that, we've been searching for about 10 minutes and we have 2 done, and we haven't even left the comforts of our chair in my office, in your case, probably a dorm room. Wherever you are, you've found 2 books and you haven't even had to get up off your butt. And that's great because the catalog is doing all of this work for us. And we've done, frankly, to be honest with me and to be honest with you, this has not been heavy lifting for us. This has not been very difficult searching. The system is designed to, once you've found, once you've really found the first thing, to kind of let you dig in, to get your teeth into where other things are around it. So we could do that again. We know that this book is next to the first book we found on the virtual shelf. So let's play the same game. Let's scroll to the bottom and check the shelf again. There's the book we saw the first time right next to it. Let's go left. Why wars happen? Probably not. War in the World from 1450 to 1600? No, that's far too early for our topic. War in the World, Military Power and the Fate of Continents. I think we're going a bit too broad here and we're starting to leave Napoleon. So let's say, no, we don't really want to browse the shelf anymore, but what about this book? We know this book was useful for us. Are there ways that we can kind of zoom in our topic yet again? Well, yes, the answer is definitively yes. And without ever having to go back to our original search, again, we still haven't even gone back to our original search string and looked at more of this list where we know we'll find more things. We know this one right here will almost certainly be a great one. We'll come back to that in a minute. You can also, when you're on the book that you're looking for, you can come to the subject headings. Now, this is a really important thing for you as an information searcher. When you put words into the catalog, when you type into the search bar, what generally the catalog is attempting to do is attempting to find these. It's attempting to match what you're writing with the subject headings. There's basically, I'm sure you all remember this, but just a refresher, there's 2 big ways that libraries in the United States are classified. There's either the Dewey Decimal System or there's the Library of Congress method. The Dewey Decimal System is typical for public libraries, and it's very typical for like high school, middle school, elementary school libraries. It's a more simple system because it's not necessarily dealing with huge numbers of volumes. It can, it often does, but it's a slightly more simple system. The Library of Congress is for academic libraries. You all are academic researchers. This is an academic university, somewhat oxymoronic. Reminds me of a very famous old quote by a U of L basketball player when he was talking at the University of Drexel during the NCAA tournament in the 80s, where he goes, is that one of those academic colleges? Long story short, this system tries to plug in your search terms to the subject headings that the Library of Congress creates to manage these big themes and these big ideas. As you can see, there are lots of these. Some books when they're created, some books when they're written, and then cataloged for the first time by a cataloger in the Library of Congress. There's quite literally somebody whose job it is to assign these initially. People across the university, the country do it as well, but the Library of Congress is the starting point for these items generally. Puts them into these categories. Sometimes they're very detailed, sometimes they're not very detailed. In this case, it's a pretty good and pretty detailed one. If we remember that we're really concentrating on Napoleon here in his quest for the decisive battle, we can see that one of these is going to be probably very useful to us. So let's just go ahead and click it. Europe, History, Military, 1789 to 1815. Let's click that subject heading and see what libraries worldwide have that have been attached to the subject heading. This is not a perfect system. Not every book gets as many subject headings as it probably should, but it is a good way to kind of move your research along. So we have European warfare, the one we were just looking at. We have War in an Age of Revolution. We can see its summary. We see that it goes from 1775, the American Revolution, to 1815, Waterloo. This is probably going to be useful to us. Hey, look, it's Waterloo. That one is certainly going to be useful to us. European armies of the French Revolution may be useful to us, possibly. The Napoleonic Wars and Illustrated History, 1979, probably a bit too old. We might want to find something better. Let's see, Military History Atlas. Nah. Armies of the Napoleonic Wars, Illustrated History. We want to stay away from illustrated histories. They're not terribly useful. This one's too broad. None of these are really sticking out as something that's super Napoleonic. Let's see if we can keep finding, and we can always go to the next page. There's lots and lots and lots of these. Guineas and gunpowder. So Britain would be interesting if we were looking at Britain and not Napoleon. Napoleon and the Awakening of Europe. It's quite old, but it might be useful to us. We'll come back to that one if we don't find a better one. Napoleon's Conquest of Europe, the War of the Third Coalition. Okay, now we're talking. 2005. It's about Napoleon. There's a big, nice, useful paragraph here that we can read through. Very important. Lots and lots. Okay, good. We have content. It discusses battles. Talks about Austerlitz. Okay, I think we found another one. So we go back. We cite. We copy. We're in. Now, the hard part about all of this for you is to remember that you want to find books that are very much on your topic and useful to your thesis. Just because I'm copying and pasting these into the document does not necessarily mean that when I go to actually break down the book and to look through it, that I'll find that it's exactly proving my topic or even necessarily talking about my topic in a specific way. I don't see anywhere on the summary here any mention of battle. Now I can infer that battles are available as some sort of a discussion point here because it mentions several battles. But again, we're trying to talk about decisive battles in the Napoleonic era. We might find that this one is useful. We might find that this one isn't useful, but at least we know where to find it. In this case, it's up in the stacks, Ekstrom Library, book stacks, 3rd floor. This one, we could just go upstairs and pull off the shelf without having to click a button, which also means that when it's time to browse the shelf, we can literally just walk up there and find these books right next to it and pull these as well. Given that we're talking about the Napoleonic Wars and Battles, I can probably assume the Napoleonic Wars, A Global History, the Napoleonic Wars by David Gates, the Cambridge History of the Napoleonic Wars, all of these would really fit what we're looking for. And so just like that, we've had book after book after book that would fit for what we need to be doing in those 7 sources without ever having to leave our chair. More importantly, if we go back to some of these others and come back to our original search string, which is waiting for us to come back to, we may find that even though we've kind of gone off on this tangent and found several books without even leaving our first original search string, it's still sitting here waiting for us. This one is a perfect one. I read this one a few years ago. It's a very good book on the subject, and the summary, very detailed. It has a whole section on Napoleon. We can go down to the contents and see decisive battle is written right there. We can talk about all of this. We can find it that's on the stacks on the third floor. It has the usual browse the shelf process. It has the usual access options. We can cite it. We can grab the citation. And so far, with very little effort, we have 4 books done. Now, you do not theoretically have to leave U of L to find any of these books. U of L has 1.2, 1.3, depending on whose number you ask, million books on the shelves, whether in closed storage or in open storage. So the chances that you can find 7 books in that 1.3 million is pretty high. But that doesn't mean that U of L has every book that may be particular to your topic. And you may find that the books you're looking for, or the book that you found, isn't located at the University of Louisville at all. And that's not a problem. And if there is a book that you found that's specific to your topic, specific to your thesis statement, that you want access to, that doesn't show as available at U of L, there is a process. So let's look at those. Let's find one of those. Right below it, nice and easy. This one, we'd say we were researching the Battle of Waterloo, and this book looks perfect. Let's click it. It's 2017. It's got a great summary here that tells us a lot about it. Very interesting content, so we know what's in it. If we were researching not just Napoleon, but the Battle of Waterloo, and that was our thesis topic, was something about the Battle of Waterloo, we would know we would want this book. But it doesn't say U of L has it. It says request from libraries worldwide. And instead of a call number or the robotic retrieval system or the book stacks or the compact shelving system, all it says is request item through interlibrary loan. Now, this is where things get really, really cool and fun. While you're a U of L student, you have access to interlibrary loan. It's free for you. It costs the libraries a tiny bit of money, but don't stress it. It costs us very little money. This system is essentially designed for U of L's libraries to go get any book that we don't have, or even any article, so you can use this for other classes, any book or article that we don't have from whatever university does have it, and they'll just ship it to us. And you'll get an email saying, hey, cool, this book is here for you to pick up from the library desk. You click the button, it's your U of L ULink ID and password again. Log in so you can see what it looks like. It automatically, when you click that button, it automatically fills all of this out for you, so you don't have to do anything, and then you just click submit request. And that request goes out to different libraries across the country. And those libraries say, yes, we do have it. Yes, we do want to loan it. So it could be like, I don't know, University of Rhode Island could say to us, yeah, we got that book. In fact, I could probably go back and tell you exactly who has it just by looking at it. Where'd that go? We can see, if you're ever interested, you can click other libraries worldwide. Tennessee Tech has this. Baker and Taylor Inc. has this. Hereford has it. Rhode Art has it. Lots of people have it. Seemingly, quite a few libraries have it. Not a ton. 16 is not a huge number, but one of them will ship it to us, and it'll show up at the circulation desk in 5 to 7 business days. And the circulation, you'll get an automatic notice saying, hey, your interlibrary loan you asked for is available for you to come pick up. Now, I'll say this as an aside, you can do this for anything. If you're still one of those cool cats using DVDs, you can request any DVD you want. You can request it for books. It doesn't just have to be for class. If there's a random book you want that you're reading a series and you don't feel like giving money to the monstrosity that is Amazon, you can simply click the interlibrary loan link for it, and we'll go get whatever book you're interested in for you as part of your wonderful perks of being an undergraduate or graduate or faculty member. It's a great system. It does take time. It takes time because it has to ship from somewhere. So you cannot click this link at 11:59 before the assignment's due and say, yeah, I'll probably be able to get this book and look it over by midnight. Doesn't work that way. And obviously you can't request ebooks this way either. It can only be a physical material. However, given the topics you're working on, between the items we have in our collection and the entire collection of every other university library across the country, you can find 7 sources. Frankly, you can probably find 7 sources in our library system But if you do find things that require interlibrary loan, I strongly recommend it. And I strongly recommend remembering this service for other moments in other papers, other classes where you need to find sources and the libraries don't have them. Click that big green link. The interlibrary loan staff is always very, very happy to do this for you. So my understanding is they do between 9 and 10,000 of these per year. So it's something that we do pretty regularly. So that's it. That's the research process. We've done essentially, I've had to talk my way through it, so it's taken a little bit longer, but we've done basically 30 minutes of searching, 30 minutes of very low impact searching, and we found 4 items relatively quickly. Now, you all want to be more specific. I've found very general books thus far. Your thesis statements are going to be specific enough that you want to modify your searches to be more specific, to be more clear on what you're looking for. But you will find 7 books very quickly by following these basic outlines. And now, so before I sign off, I'm going to remind one thing about this. If you ever get stuck, if you ever need help, if you ever have questions about whether something is reliable, whether it's too old to use, shoot me an email. Things I don't want to see cited generally are, I don't think, given the scope of this paper, you don't need to be citing primary resources. None of your all's topics are that, most of the time, nobody's topics are that necessary for a secondary source review to have primary aggregators in them. So remember, 7 sources, 7 items, must be 7 books. Follow this process and you'll do just fine. But if you ever get stuck or if you ever have issues with your searching or what you're finding, shoot me an email and I'm always available for one-on-one research appointments, or if you just want to pop by after class and say, hey, I need a little bit of help with this. But follow these steps, see where they take you in your search process, follow my guidelines, and you'll do very well with this, I promise. Otherwise, shoot me a note, we'll figure it out together. All righty, I'm gonna sign off and figure out how to upload this to YouTube.